The research vessel. Compassionate Dawn drifted silently through the void between star systems, its hull scarred from 3 years of deep space exploration. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge, watching the stars through the viewport as her crew of 12 conducted their final checks before entering hypersleep for the journey home to Earth. The Dawn was humanity's most advanced exploration ship, equipped with experimental technology that allowed it to venture further into uncharted space than any vessel before it. Their mission had been successful beyond all expectations, cataloging 17 new star systems and discovering evidence of ancient civilizations on 4 different worlds. "Captain," called out Communications Officer James Park from his station, "I'm picking up something strange on the long-range sensors." Elena turned from the viewport, her weathered face showing immediate concern. After 30 years in space, she had learned to trust her crew's instincts completely. "What kind of strange, James?" "It's a signal, ma'am. Very faint, but it's definitely artificial. The computer is having trouble decoding it, but the pattern suggests it might be a distress call." The bridge fell silent except for the soft humming of the ship's systems. Elena moved to James's station and studied the readouts on his screen. The signal was indeed faint, barely distinguishable from background radiation, but there was an unmistakable pattern to it. "How far?" she asked. "Approximately 47 light-years, Captain. The signal is coming from the Kepler 442 system." Elena frowned. According to their star charts, Kepler 442 was an unremarkable system with no known intelligent life. The primary star was a red dwarf, and while there were several planets in the system, none had shown signs of harboring advanced civilizations during previous surveys. "Chief Engineer Martinez, how long would it take us to reach that system?" Elena called out. Chief Engineer Rosa Martinez looked up from her console. "With our current fuel reserves and the hyperdrive in its present condition, about 6 weeks, Captain. But that would leave us cutting it close for the return journey to Earth." Elena weighed the options carefully. They were already 3 months past their scheduled return date, and she knew the families back on Earth were anxious for their loved ones to come home. But the possibility of discovering a new intelligent species was too important to ignore. "James, can you clean up that signal any further?" "I'm trying, Captain. The computer is running analysis protocols now." James worked frantically at his console, adjusting frequencies and filtering out interference. "Wait, I'm getting something clearer now." A new sound filled the bridge, a series of clicks and tones that definitely sounded like an attempt at communication. But underlying the alien sounds there was something else, something that made Elena's blood run cold. "Captain," James said quietly, his face pale, "the computer has identified some mathematical patterns in the signal. It's definitely a distress call, and based on the repetition and urgency indicators, it appears to be automated. But, Captain, there's something else." "What is it?" "The signal has been broadcasting for approximately 18 months, Earth time. Whatever sent this message has been calling for help for a very long time." Elena felt the weight of command settle on her shoulders. Every instinct told her to investigate, but she also had a responsibility to her crew. She looked around the bridge at the faces of her team, men and women who had followed her into the unknown for 3 years without question. "All hands, this is the captain," she announced over the ship's intercom. "Report to the main conference room in 10 minutes. We have a decision to make." The conference room was cramped with all 12 crew members present, but Elena had always believed in transparency when it came to major decisions. She explained the situation quickly and efficiently, then opened the floor for discussion. "Captain," said Dr. Sarah Chen, the ship's xenobiologist, "this could be the discovery of a lifetime. If there's intelligent life in that system, we have an obligation to respond to their distress call." "With respect, Doc," replied Navigation Officer Tom Brady, "our first obligation is to get home safely. We don't know what we might be walking into." Engineer Martinez spoke up. The ship can handle the journey, Captain. It won't be easy, but we can do it. The question is whether we should. Elena listened as her crew debated the merits and risks of the mission. She was proud of how thoughtfully they approached the problem, considering not just their own safety, but their broader responsibilities as explorers and representatives of humanity. "There's another factor to consider," said Dr. Chen quietly. "If this is a genuine distress call, and if the species that sent it is still alive after 18 months, they might not survive much longer without help. We could be their only hope." The room fell silent as the weight of that possibility sank in. Elena looked at each member of her crew individually, seeing the same resolve in their eyes that had carried them through 3 years of dangerous exploration. "All in favor of investigating the signal?" she asked. 12 hands rose as one. Then it settled. "Tom, plot a course for Kepler 442. Rosa, I want every system checked and double-checked before we jump. James, keep monitoring that signal and see if you can learn anything more about its source." As the crew dispersed to prepare for the journey, Elena remained in the conference room, staring at the star charts displayed on the wall screen. Something about the situation bothered her, though she couldn't put her finger on what it was. The signal had been broadcasting for 18 months, which meant whatever sent it had survived for a considerable time after whatever disaster had befallen them. 3 days later, the compassionate Dawn entered hyperspace, its destination a red dwarf star system that no human had ever visited. The journey would take 6 weeks, during which the crew would take turns in hypersleep to conserve resources and maintain the ship. Elena chose to take the first watch, preferring to be awake during the initial stages of the journey when problems were most likely to occur. She spent long hours on the bridge, monitoring the ship's systems and thinking about what they might find at their destination. On the 5th day of the journey, James made a breakthrough with the alien signal. He had been working tirelessly to decode more of the message, and his efforts finally paid off when the computer identified additional mathematical sequences. "Captain," he called excitedly, "I've got more of the message decoded. It's definitely a distress call, and I'm picking up what appear to be coordinates within the Kepler 442 system. But, Captain, there's something else." "What now, James?" "The message contains references to multiple ships, ma'am, at least 30 vessels according to my count, and based on the energy signatures in the data stream, these ships are massive. We're talking about vessels that could house thousands of individuals." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. The idea of an entire fleet in distress was sobering, but it also raised new questions about what had happened to them. Natural disasters rarely affected multiple ships simultaneously unless they were in very close proximity. "Any indication of what kind of distress they're experiencing?" "That's the troubling part, Captain. The few words I've been able to translate suggest they're under attack. The message mentions hunters and death ships repeatedly." The bridge crew exchanged worried glances. The possibility that they were heading into an active conflict zone changed everything. Elena knew she should consider turning back, but the thought of abandoning thousands of beings to their fate was unbearable. "Keep working on the translation, James. I want to know everything we can about the situation before we arrive." Over the next several weeks, more pieces of the puzzle fell into place. The alien fleet was identified as belonging to a species called the Kethvar, peaceful traders and explorers who had been ambushed while conducting scientific research in the Kepler 442 system. The attackers were described as ruthless pirates who showed no mercy to their victims. The Dawn's small crew began to feel the weight of what they were facing. They were a single research vessel with minimal armament, heading toward a battle zone where 30 massive ships had already fallen victim to attackers powerful enough to overwhelm them. "Captain," said Lieutenant Sophia Reyes, the ship's security officer, "I've been reviewing our weapon systems. We have defensive shields, 2 laser cannons, and a small complement of torpedoes. Against enemies capable of defeating 30 Kethvar ships, We might not last 5 minutes." Elena nodded grimly. She had come to the same conclusion, but turning back now felt like abandoning their principles as explorers and representatives of humanity. "There might be another way," said Dr. Chen thoughtfully. "We don't have to engage the attackers directly. If we can locate survivors and evacuate them, we could save at least some lives." "That's assuming there are any survivors left after 18 months, replied Martinez. "The signal is still broadcasting," James pointed out. "Someone or something is still alive down there, or the message would have stopped." As they neared their destination, Elena found herself spending more time in the ship's observation deck, looking out at the stars and thinking about the decisions that had brought them to this point. Her crew trusted her judgment completely, but she wondered if she was leading them into a situation they couldn't handle. When the Dawn finally dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442 system, the sight that greeted them was worse than anyone had imagined. The wreckage of the HFY fleet was scattered across the inner system, massive ships torn apart and left drifting among the asteroid belt. "Captain," whispered James, his voice barely audible, "I'm reading life signs on several of the wrecked vessels. Faint, but definitely there. And Captain, the distress signal is coming from the largest ship, about 2 million kilometers from our current position." Elena stared at the destruction displayed on the main screen, feeling a mixture of horror and determination. Somewhere in that debris field, survivors were clinging to life after 18 months of hell, waiting for rescue that might never come. But they had come this far, and Elena Vasquez had never abandoned anyone in need. Not in 30 years of service, and she wasn't about to start now. "All stations, prepare for approach to the distress beacon. We're going in." The compassionate Dawn moved carefully through the debris field, its hull occasionally scraping against twisted metal that had once been proud HFY vessels. Captain Elena Vasquez stood rigid on the bridge, watching the destruction unfold on the main screen with a growing sense of horror and rage. "Captain," James called out softly, "I'm detecting the source of the distress signal. It's coming from what appears to be the command ship of the fleet. The vessel is badly damaged, but still maintaining minimal life support in 3 sections. Life signs? Confirmed. I'm reading approximately 47 beings still alive aboard that vessel. Their biosignatures are weak but stable." Elena felt a mixture of relief and urgency. After 18 months, it was miraculous that anyone had survived, but time was clearly running out for the survivors. "Tom, bring us alongside. Sophia, prepare the emergency rescue equipment. Rosa, I want portable life support ready for transport." As they approached the massive HFY command ship, the extent of the damage became apparent. The vessel was easily 10 times the size of the Dawn, its hull torn open in dozens of places by what appeared to be energy weapons of incredible power. Entire sections had been vaporized, leaving the ship looking like a partially eaten carcass. "Captain," said Dr. Chen, studying the readings from her console, "the attack patterns are consistent with systematic destruction. This wasn't a random pirate raid. Someone wanted to ensure no one survived." Elena clenched her fists, feeling an emotion she rarely allowed herself to experience while on duty. The deliberate cruelty of the attack offended every principle she held dear. Whoever had done this hadn't been content with simply defeating the HFY fleet. They had wanted to inflict maximum suffering. "Docking Bay 7 appears to be intact," reported Tom. "I can get us close enough to establish an emergency airlock connection." "Do it." "James, try to establish communication with the survivors. Let them know help is here." The next hour was a race against time. Elena led the rescue team personally, moving through the darkened corridors of the HFY ship with portable lights and emergency breathing equipment. The scenes they encountered would haunt her for the rest of her life. The HFY were a tall, slender species with crystalline skin that normally glowed with inner light. The survivors they found were barely recognizable, their skin dim and cracked from months of deprivation. Many were unconscious, sustained only by the ship's failing emergency systems. "These are the ones who were left to die slowly," Dr. Chen said quietly as they worked to stabilize the survivors for transport. "The attackers could have destroyed this section easily, but they chose to let them suffer." Elena's jaw tightened, but she forced herself to focus on the rescue. There would be time for anger later. Right now, these beings needed medical attention and safety. The leader of the survivors was a HFY named Veltar, whose crystalline skin flickered weakly as he struggled to communicate with the humans. Dr. Chen's universal translator worked overtime to convert his words into something understandable. "You came," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "We thought all hope was lost." "You're safe now," Elena assured him. "We're going to get you and your people to our ship." "The Sekthor," Veltar continued, his skin flashing with what the translator interpreted as intense fear. They took our children, our young ones, said they would make examples." Elena felt ice form in her veins. "Where did they take them?" "Mining station in the asteroid belt. They broadcast the executions, made us watch, every day for months." Dr. Chen and Elena exchanged horrified glances. The systematic torture of prisoners, especially children, was something that violated the most basic principles of civilized behavior. Elena had seen many terrible things in her career, but this level of calculated cruelty was beyond anything she had encountered. As they transported the survivors back to the Dawn, more details of the attack emerged. The Sekthor were a nomadic species of raiders who had built their entire culture around the suffering of others. They didn't simply kill their enemies. They found ways to maximize pain and terror, using fear as both weapon and entertainment. The HFY had been exploring the Kepler 442 system to establish a peaceful research station when the Sekthor had arrived with a massive fleet of warships. The attack had been swift and merciless, but instead of simply destroying the HFY fleet, the Sekthor had disabled the ships and taken thousands of prisoners. "They separated us," Veltar explained, as Dr. Chen worked to stabilize his condition in the Dawn's medical bay. "Adults on some ships, children on others. They wanted us to hear the screams, to know that our failure to resist meant our young ones would pay the price." Elena listened to this account with growing fury. She had always prided herself on maintaining professional detachment, but the calculated evil of the Sekthor's actions pushed her beyond the limits of her patience. "How many of your people did they take?" she asked. "Nearly 3,000. Most are dead now. The Sekthor, they enjoy their work." Elena excused herself from the medical bay and returned to the bridge, where her crew was monitoring the system for signs of the Sekthor fleet. Her face was pale with rage, and everyone could see that something had fundamentally changed in their captain's demeanor. "James, I want you to locate that mining station. Use active sensors if you have to." "Captain," said Lieutenant Reyes carefully, "if we use active sensors, we'll definitely be detected by any Sekthor ships in the system." "Good. I want them to know we're here." The crew exchanged worried glances. They had never seen their captain like this, and the change was unsettling. Elena had always been measured and careful, weighing risks against benefits with methodical precision. This new version of their captain seemed driven by something darker and more primal. "Captain," said Dr. Chen, entering the bridge, "I've completed my examination of the survivors. What they've endured, it's beyond description. The Sekthor didn't just torture them physically. They used psychological warfare designed to break their spirits completely." "How many children were taken?" "Approximately 800, ranging from young adolescents to infants. Captain, based on what Veltar has told me about Sekthor practices, most of those children are probably dead by now." Elena was quiet for a long moment, staring at the tactical display showing the distribution of wreckage throughout the system. When she finally spoke, her voice was cold and controlled in a way that made her crew nervous. James, send a message on all frequencies. Address it to the Sec-Thor Fleet Commander. What should the message say, Captain? Elena turned to face her communications officer, and he was startled by the expression in her eyes. There was something there that he had never seen before, something that spoke of consequences beyond measurement. Tell them that the United Earth Deep Space Command has arrived to investigate reports of atrocities committed against civilians. Tell them that they have 1 hour to release any prisoners they're holding and surrender themselves for trial under interstellar law. Captain, said Martinez uncertainly, we're one ship. If there's a Sec-Thor fleet in this system, tell them, Elena continued, ignoring the interruption, that this is their only opportunity to avoid the complete destruction of their forces. Tell them that humanity does not negotiate with species that torture children. Lieutenant Reyes stood up from her console. Captain, with all due respect, we don't have the firepower to make good on that kind of threat. One ship against a fleet is suicide. Elena turned to look at each member of her crew individually. They were good people, brave and intelligent, and they deserved to understand what they were facing. You're right, Sophia. We don't have the firepower, but that's not the point. Sometimes you have to take a stand regardless of the odds. Sometimes you have to send a message that some lines cannot be crossed without consequences. She moved to the captain's chair and sat down, her posture radiating determination and barely controlled fury. The Sec-Thor have spent months torturing innocent people for entertainment. They've murdered children to break the spirits of their parents. They've turned cruelty into an art form, and they've done it because they believed no one would stop them. Elena's voice grew harder with each word. They were wrong. Send the message, James. The communication went out on all frequencies, broadcast throughout the Kepler 442 system in multiple languages, including the Sec-Thor's own tongue. The message was clear and uncompromising: surrender or face destruction. The response came within 30 minutes. Captain, James reported, his face pale. We're receiving a reply from the Sec-Thor fleet. They're transmitting video of Kethvar prisoners being executed. They say it's their response to our demands. Elena watched the horrific footage in silence, her hands gripping the armrests of her chair so tightly that her knuckles turned white. The Sec-Thor weren't just refusing to surrender, they were escalating their cruelty in direct response to humanity's demands. How many ships? She asked quietly. Long-range sensors detect 12 Sec-Thor vessels approaching our position. The lead ship is massive, Captain. At least twice the size of the Kethvar command ship. Elena stood up slowly, her movements controlled and deliberate. She walked to the main viewport and stared out at the stars, her mind working through possibilities and probabilities. Her crew watched her nervously, knowing that whatever decision she made in the next few minutes would determine whether they lived or died. Tom, plot a course for Earth, maximum speed. The crew looked confused. After all her talk about taking a stand, was the captain now ordering a retreat? James, I want you to compose another message. This one goes directly to Earth Command, Priority Alpha. Tell them that the research vessel, Compassionate Dawn, has encountered a hostile species engaged in genocide against civilian populations. Tell them that we have documented evidence of systematic torture and murder of children. Elena turned back to face her crew, and they could see that her earlier rage had crystallized into something colder and more terrifying. Tell them that Captain Elena Vasquez, acting under emergency protocols, has declared the species known as the Sec-Thor to be an enemy of humanity and a threat to all civilized life in this sector of the galaxy. She moved back to her command chair, her voice taking on the formal tone of official military communication. Tell them that I am requesting immediate deployment of the Third Fleet under Rules of Engagement Category Omega, total warfare authorization requested against all Sec-Thor forces and installations. The bridge fell silent as the implications of that request sank in. Category Omega was the highest level of military response, reserved for threats to humanity's very survival. It authorized the use of any and all weapons, including those normally banned by interstellar treaty. "Captain," said Dr. Chen quietly, "Category Omega authorization requires proof of imminent threat to human populations." Elena smiled, but there was no warmth in the expression. The Sec-Thor just broadcast the murder of civilians in response to a peaceful request for prisoner release. They've demonstrated that they consider torture and murder to be appropriate diplomatic responses. That makes them an imminent threat to any human who might encounter them in the future. She turned to her communications officer. "Send the message, James, and include all our sensor data on the Kethvar massacre and the execution footage the Sec-Thor just sent us." As the message was transmitted toward Earth, Elena allowed herself to imagine what would happen when it reached its destination. The Third Fleet was humanity's most powerful military force, equipped with weapons that could sterilize entire star systems if necessary. The Sec-Thor had made a critical error in judgment. They had assumed that one small human ship represented the full extent of humanity's response to their atrocities. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Elena looked out at the approaching Sec-Thor fleet and felt a cold satisfaction. In approximately 6 weeks, when the Third Fleet arrived in the Kepler 442 system, the Sec-Thor would discover that there were consequences for making humanity angry. Some species learned through diplomacy. Others learned through trade and cultural exchange. The Sec-Thor were about to learn through fire. 6 weeks had passed since the Compassionate Dawn transmitted its message to Earth Command, and the small research vessel continued its deadly game of cat and mouse with the Sec-Thor fleet. Captain Elena Vasquez had transformed her ship and crew into something the enemy hadn't expected. A constant, maddening reminder that their atrocities had been witnessed and recorded. The Dawn was far too small and maneuverable for the massive Sec-Thor warships to catch, but Elena wasn't content to simply run and hide. Instead, she had turned her ship into a psychological weapon, striking at undefended Sec-Thor installations throughout the system and broadcasting evidence of their crimes on all frequencies. "Captain," reported James from his communications station, "I'm picking up chatter from the Sec-Thor command ship. They're getting frustrated with our hit-and-run tactics. Their fleet commander is demanding that his captains find us and destroy us." Elena smiled grimly. The Sec-Thor had expected to intimidate one small human ship into fleeing the system. Instead, they found themselves being hunted by prey that refused to act like a victim. Lieutenant Reyes looked up from the tactical console. "Captain, we've confirmed the destruction of 3 more Sec-Thor mining operations. Their resource extraction in this system has dropped by 60% since we started our harassment campaign." "Good. How many prisoners have we freed?" 43 Kethvar so far, Captain, all from labor camps where they were being worked to death. The survivors confirmed that the main prisoner compound is located on Sec-Thor Prime, their mobile command station. Elena nodded. Over the past 6 weeks, they had learned much about their enemy. The Sec-Thor operated as a nomadic empire, moving from system to system in a massive mobile city that served as both command center and primary habitat. Their entire culture was built around the concept of dominance through terror, and they had never encountered serious resistance to their methods. "Dr. Chen, what's the status of our rescued Kethvar?" "They're recovering well, Captain. The portable medical bay is crowded, but we're managing. Veltar has been extremely helpful in providing intelligence about Sec-Thor operations." The Kethvar leader had indeed proven invaluable, sharing detailed information about Sec-Thor tactics, technology, and psychology. More importantly, he had provided Elena with confirmation that hundreds of Kethvar children were still alive. being held aboard the mobile command station as both hostages and entertainment for their captors. "Captain," said Engineer Martinez from her station, "I'm detecting massive hyperspace signatures at the edge of the system, multiple contacts, military configuration." Elena felt her heart rate increase. After 6 weeks of waiting, the cavalry had finally arrived. "How many ships, Rosa?" "Computer is having trouble getting an exact count, Captain. The signatures are overlapping, but I'm reading at least 40 vessels. No, wait. 60 vessels. Captain, these are big ships, dreadnought class at minimum." Elena moved to the main viewport and stared out at the stars, knowing that somewhere out there, humanity's response to the Sector atrocities was dropping out of hyperspace with enough firepower to reshape the galaxy. "James, open a channel on all military frequencies. This is Captain Elena Vasquez, commanding officer of the research vessel Compassionate Dawn, requesting permission to join the 3rd Fleet Battle Group." The response came quickly, and the voice that answered carried the authority of ultimate command. "Captain Vasquez, this is Admiral Sarah Chen commanding the 3rd Fleet. We received your reports and evidence. Well done, Captain. You and your crew have performed above and beyond the call of duty." Elena blinked in surprise. Admiral Chen shared a surname with her ship's doctor, but that coincidence was less important than the tone in the Admiral's voice. There was something there that spoke of controlled fury and imminent retribution. "Admiral, what are your orders?" "Captain, you are hereby attached to the 3rd Fleet as forward reconnaissance. We need real-time intelligence on Sector positions and prisoner locations. Can you provide that?" "Affirmative, Admiral. We have detailed intelligence on enemy operations throughout the system." "Excellent. Captain, I want you to know that your message reached Earth at a time when humanity was already dealing with 3 other species that had tested our patience. The Governing Council has authorized full military response under the Galactic Security Act. The Sector have been declared enemies of all civilized life." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. The Galactic Security Act was humanity's most extreme military protocol, reserved for species deemed irredeemably hostile to peaceful coexistence. "Admiral, are you saying—" "I'm saying, Captain, that the 3rd Fleet has been authorized to use any and all means necessary to eliminate the Sector as a threat to galactic security. We are not here to negotiate or to capture prisoners. We are here to end their ability to harm others, permanently." The communication ended, leaving Elena and her crew staring at each other in stunned silence. They had expected a rescue mission, perhaps a limited military response. What they were witnessing was the arrival of an extermination fleet. Over the next few hours, the 3rd Fleet deployed throughout the Kepler 442 system with mechanical precision. Elena watched in awe as humanity's most advanced warships took up positions that would prevent any Sector vessel from escaping to hyperspace. Admiral Chen's flagship, the dreadnought Righteous Fury, was a kilometer long and bristled with weapons that could crack a planet's crust. Accompanying it were dozens of heavy cruisers, destroyers, and support ships, each one individually more powerful than the entire Sector fleet. "Captain!" James called out, his voice shaking slightly. "Admiral Chen is requesting a real-time link to our intelligence files. She wants complete tactical information on all Sector positions and prisoner locations." Elena authorized the data transfer, watching as 6 weeks of carefully gathered intelligence flowed to the 3rd Fleet's command computers. Within minutes, human tactical systems had analyzed every piece of information and formulated a battle plan. The Sector, meanwhile, had detected the arrival of the human fleet and were frantically trying to organize a response. Their massive mobile command station began moving toward the system's edge, clearly hoping to escape before the humans could engage. "Captain," reported Dr. Chen, "Veltar is asking to speak with you. He says it's urgent." Elena hurried to the medical bay, where the Kethvar leader was struggling to sit up despite his injuries. "Captain Vasquez," he said, his crystalline skin flickering with urgency. the Sekthor command station. If they realize they cannot escape, they will execute all prisoners rather than allow them to be rescued. It is their way. Elena felt ice form in her stomach. Hundreds of innocent beings, including children, were about to be murdered out of spite. How long do we have? Minutes, perhaps, once they begin the executions. They will not stop until all are dead. Elena rushed back to the bridge and opened an emergency channel to Admiral Chen. "Admiral, this is Captain Vasquez. We have intelligence indicating that the Sekthor will execute all prisoners if they believe escape is impossible. Recommend immediate action to prevent mass murder." Admiral Chen's response was immediate and decisive. "Understood, Captain. All fleet units, execute Plan Omega immediately. Target their engines and weapons, but do not destroy the command station. We need those prisoners alive." What followed was the most precisely executed military operation Elena had ever witnessed. The Third Fleet moved with the coordination of a single organism, surrounding the Sekthor command station and disabling its weapons and engines within minutes. The smaller Sekthor warships that tried to intervene were destroyed without ceremony, their hulls vaporized by weapons that had been designed to end conflicts quickly and decisively. Within 30 minutes, the entire Sekthor fleet had been reduced to scattered debris and one crippled command station. "Admiral Chen to Captain Vasquez. We're preparing to board the command station. We need your Kethvar allies to guide our Marines to the prisoner compounds." Elena looked at Veltar, who had insisted on coming to the bridge despite his injuries. The Kethvar leader's skin was glowing brighter than she had ever seen it, and she realized he was experiencing something close to hope for the first time in 18 months. "Admiral, Veltar will provide whatever assistance you need. Just, please hurry. They've suffered enough." The boarding operation was swift and merciless. Human Marines, equipped with the finest military technology available, swept through the Sekthor command station like an avenging storm. The Sekthor defenders, accustomed to fighting against weakened and demoralized victims, were no match for professional soldiers fighting with focused fury. Elena monitored the operation from the Dawn's Bridge, listening to reports as Marine units secured prisoner compounds and freed hundreds of survivors. The human forces moved with surgical precision, eliminating Sekthor resistance while carefully protecting the innocents they had come to save. "Captain," James reported with obvious emotion, "the Marines have reached the juvenile compound. They're reporting, Captain, they've found them. The children are alive." Elena closed her eyes and felt tears of relief streaming down her face. After months of horror and uncertainty, the youngest victims of Sekthor cruelty were finally safe. The final phase of the operation involved securing the Sekthor leadership for questioning. Admiral Chen had specific plans for the beings responsible for organizing and perpetuating the atrocities against the Kethvar. "Captain Vasquez," Admiral Chen's voice came over the communication system. "Would you and your crew like to join us aboard the Righteous Fury? I believe you've earned the right to witness the conclusion of this operation." Elena accepted the invitation, and within hours she and her senior staff were aboard the massive dreadnought. The ship's bridge was a marvel of human engineering, filled with tactical displays and communication systems that coordinated the movements of dozens of vessels. Admiral Chen was a tall, stern woman whose bearing spoke of absolute confidence and controlled anger. When she greeted Elena, there was respect in her eyes, but also something darker. "Captain, your actions in this system have saved hundreds of lives and provided humanity with evidence of atrocities that cannot be ignored or forgotten. You've done your duty and more." "Thank you, Admiral. What happens now?" Admiral Chen gestured toward the main view screen, which showed the crippled Sekthor command station surrounded by human ships. "Now we ensure that the Sekthor never again threaten innocent life. We've identified their home system and the location of their remaining fleet elements." The Third Fleet will systematically eliminate their ability to conduct raids against peaceful species. Elena understood the implications. Humanity was not content to simply rescue the HFY prisoners. They intended to end the Sector threat permanently. All their ships, Admiral? All their ships, all their bases, all their military infrastructure. The Sector built their entire civilization on the suffering of others. They've forfeited their right to exist as a spacefaring species. Elena watched as human ships began the systematic destruction of Sector facilities throughout the system. Every mining station, every supply depot, every piece of infrastructure that could support future raids was methodically eliminated. The Sector command staff, when brought before Admiral Chen for questioning, showed no remorse for their actions. Their leader, a scarred being who called himself War Master Krex then, actually seemed proud of the pain he had inflicted. "You cannot stop us," he snarled through the universal translator. "We are eternal. We are inevitable. Others will rise to take our place." Admiral Chen looked at him with the cold expression of someone passing final judgment. "Perhaps, but you will not live to see it." The interrogations revealed the locations of other Sector fleets and the systems they had recently attacked. Armed with this intelligence, Admiral Chen dispatched task forces to hunt down every remaining Sector military unit in known space. Elena remained aboard the Righteous Fury for several more weeks, watching as humanity's response to the Sector atrocities played out across multiple star systems. The Third Fleet was relentless and thorough, eliminating Sector forces wherever they found them and establishing monitoring stations to ensure no survivors could rebuild. The rescued HFY prisoners were transported to human medical facilities for treatment and rehabilitation. Veltar, now fully recovered, served as liaison between his people and their human rescuers. "Captain Vasquez," he said during one of their conversations, "my people will never forget what you did for us. When you could have fled to safety, you chose to stay and fight. When you could have hidden, you chose to bear witness to our suffering and call for justice." Elena looked out at the stars through the observation deck viewport, thinking about the events that had brought them to this point. "We couldn't just leave you there, Veltar. That's not who we are." "It is exactly who you are, Captain, and that is why the galaxy is safer with humans in it." 6 months after the compassionate Dawn had first received the HFY distress signal, Elena stood on the bridge of her ship as they prepared to return to Earth. The Sector threat had been eliminated completely, their fleets destroyed, and their leaders dead. The surviving HFY had been relocated to a safe system under human protection. "Captain," James called out from his communications station, "we're receiving a message from Earth Command, Priority Alpha." Elena accepted the transmission and found herself looking at the familiar face of Fleet Admiral Harrison, the highest-ranking officer in the Earth Defense Forces. "Captain Vasquez," Admiral Harrison said formally, "on behalf of humanity and our allies, I want to thank you and your crew for your exceptional service. Your actions in the Kepler 442 system have saved countless lives and eliminated a threat to galactic peace." He paused, his expression becoming more serious. "Captain, I also want you to know that your reports and evidence have been distributed to every major spacefaring civilization in our sector of the galaxy. The response has been unanimous. 17 different species have formally requested that humanity serve as the regional security authority for this sector." Elena raised her eyebrows in surprise. Humanity had always been careful to avoid appearing as galactic enforcers, preferring diplomacy and cooperation to military dominance. "Admiral, are we accepting that responsibility?" Admiral Harrison smiled, but it was not a pleasant expression. "Captain, humanity has learned an important lesson from the Sector incident. There are species in this galaxy that understand only one language: force. Diplomacy and negotiation are useless against beings who view cruelty as entertainment and murder as art." He leaned forward, his voice becoming harder. "So yes, Captain, We are accepting that responsibility. Humanity will serve as the galactic security authority for this sector, and any species that chooses to follow the Sector example will discover that there are consequences for making us angry. Elena looked around at her crew, seeing pride and determination in their faces. They had started their journey as explorers and scientists, seeking new knowledge and peaceful contact with alien civilizations. They were ending it as something else entirely, the representatives of a species that had proven it would not tolerate the abuse of innocence. "Set course for Earth," she commanded. "Maximum speed." As the compassionate Dawn entered hyperspace for the journey home, Elena reflected on the changes that had occurred over the past months. Humanity had revealed a new aspect of its nature to the galaxy, one that peaceful species found reassuring and predatory ones found terrifying. The Sector had sent out an SOS of sorts when they tortured and murdered innocent beings. They had called for a response, perhaps hoping to attract more victims or simply to spread fear among potential enemies. They had gotten their response, but it wasn't the one they had expected. Somewhere in the vast darkness of space, other predatory species received the news of the Sector's complete destruction and began to reconsider their own practices. Word spread quickly through the criminal networks and raider fleets that operated on the edges of civilized space. Humanity was watching, and humanity did not forgive atrocities against the innocent. Elena smiled as she watched the stars blur past in hyperspace. The galaxy was indeed a safer place with humans in it, not because humanity sought dominance, but because humanity refused to allow evil to flourish unchallenged. The Sector had provoked the fury of humanity, and that fury had proved unstoppable. It was a lesson that would not be forgotten by anyone who witnessed it, and it would serve as a warning to any species that might consider following in the Sector's footsteps. Some called for help and received mercy. Others called for justice and received it. And some, like the Sector, called for war and discovered that humanity was very, very good at giving them exactly what they asked for.